But then also make sure that you're going to that living source of power from above, from outside of self. He says, I decided in the spring of 1927 to do just that. And worldwide enterprises affecting the lives of millions of people on all continents have resulted. Many thousands of lives have been changed, turned right side up, made more successful, and happy. So you can't deny, really, the fruits that came from that life of service to God. That determination to make the lives of others better. In that article, that Good News article from 1983, Mr. Armstrong talked about the three dimensions that there are to rely upon. The dimension of within, and then the around, those that you associate with, those that you spend time with, those that you live with. And then also the dimension from above, within, around, and above. And he said that most successful people in this world rely on those first two dimensions only. They're driven, they're ambitious from within. They surround themselves with good people, smart people, capable people. But they don't go to the source from above. They don't round it out with God's sense of direction and focus. With God's power. Look at Philippians 4. Philippians chapter 4. We can't ignore that dimension, that other dimension, the one from above, as Mr. Armstrong said. I mean, that's what conversion is all about. Going to that other source, that source from above, Philippians chapter 4, and starting here in verse 18, Paul's talking about those that were providing him with some much-needed assistance. Verse 18 says, But I have all, and abound, he says. I am full, having received of Epaphroditus the things which were sent from you. The church brethren had sent things to encourage him, to comfort him, an odor of sweet smell, a sacrifice acceptable, well-pleasing to God. I mean, he was in jail, so he needed some comfort and encouragement. And the brethren really acted to encourage him. They went over to help him. And then notice verse 19, it says, But my God shall supply all your need according to his riches in glory by Jesus Christ. God does for us what we're unable to do ourselves, as you've probably heard it said before. Mr. Armstrong says, usually, God will supply your need through your own efforts. God will give you the guidance and the direction, and he'll supply those needs through your efforts as you yield to him, as you willingly follow the steps in front of you that God sets, that Jesus sets. Then he'll supply those needs. They don't generally just land on our lap as we sit on the sofa. We've got to go and act on what God has revealed. Isaiah chapter 40. Let's just look at this God that we serve and obey. What a source of power he is. What a source of encouragement. What a wonderful divine guide we have in God to lead us, to teach us, to show us the way. Isaiah 40 in verse 12, it says, Who has measured the waters in the hollow of his hand, and meted out heaven with the span, and comprehended the dust of the earth in a measure, and weighed the mountains in scales and the hills in a balance? Who has directed the Spirit of the Lord, or being his counselor has taught him? With whom took he counsel, and who instructed him, and taught him in the path of judgment, and taught him knowledge, and showed to him the way of understanding? I mean, who is there among us? Who is there among mankind that has sat down and taught God, that's instructed the Creator? God is our maker. God is Creator. God is our Lord and Master, our Father, our teacher. Verse 15, Behold, the nations are as a drop of a bucket, and are counted as the small dust of the balance. Behold, he takes up the isles as a very little thing. All nations, verse 17 continues, all nations before him are as nothing, and they are counted to him less than nothing or vanity. See, great nations, the great nations of this earth, they're just a drop in the bucket to God. Verse 22 says, it is he that sits upon the circle of the earth, and the inhabitants thereof are as grasshoppers, that stretches out the heavens as a curtain and spreads them out as a tent to dwell in. See, the earth is, you can look at Isaiah 66 later and just see how the earth is like a footstool to God. Wonderful descriptive language here that's pointing out just how awesome and powerful our Maker really and truly is. Verse 25, it says, to whom then will you liken me, or shall I be equal, says the Holy One? Lift up your eyes on high, and behold, who has created these things, that brings out their host by number? He calls them all by names. I mean, he has names for all of the stars and the planets in the universe. And God wants us to lift up our eyes, as I've covered recently in that program on the universe, but not just to see his awesome wonder and splendor, to not just see his creative genius, the masterpiece that is the universe, but to also look to him as that divine source that will empower us. Notice verse 28, have you not known? Have you not heard that the everlasting God, the Lord, the creator of the ends of the earth, faints not, neither is weary? There is no searching of his understanding. God doesn't get tired. God can't just listen to one individual offering prayers and that's it. He can keep a jillion activities going at once. He deals with each of us in a very personable way and manner. He doesn't weary. He doesn't get tired. He doesn't sleep. He doesn't rest. Not in that sense. He certainly rested when he made the Sabbath, of course. Verse 29, it says, he gives power to the faint, and to them that have no might, he increases strength. Verse 31 finally says, but they that wait upon the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings as eagles. They shall run and not be weary, and they shall walk and not be faint. Have you ever gone to God when you've been a little bit down or tired or out of it or lacking focus, and talked to him about it and prayed earnestly to God about that, and then gotten up and just been invigorated? Have you ever experienced that? I have. I've experienced that over and over and over again. You know why? Because I get tired and weary, because I bog down, because I can lose my focus. And it's a wonderful source to know that when we go to God, he will provide. He will provide for us. He will empower us. He will enliven us. If it's important enough for us to go and receive the strength. Look at what he did with Mr. Armstrong. Look at how energetic Mr. Armstrong was in his 90s, even as his eyesight was dim, even as physically he was near the end of his life. And he just put out Mystery of the Ages in that last year. No big deal. This was the best work of his life. And he was 93. Mr. Armstrong writes in that article, I found 56 years ago a far more practical and resultful confidence than self-confidence. I found the confidence that is faith. He found the confidence that is faith. Faith in God. Faith in God's power. Faith in God's strength. Look at Matthew 17. Matthew 17, you remember that other example in the Gospels where the disciples were just astonished at what Christ was actually expecting of that young man who wouldn't sell off his goods. And Jesus told the disciples, look, with men it is impossible. It's impossible to obey God, just in the carnal sense. But with God in us, all things are possible. With God, it is entirely possible. Matthew 17 and verse 14, it It says, and when they were come to the multitude, there came to him a certain man kneeling down to him and saying, Lord, have mercy on my son, for he is a lunatic and sore vexed, and for oftentimes he falls into the fire and oftentimes into the water. And I brought him to your disciples, and they could not cure him. The disciples couldn't help this individual. It was impossible. Verse 17, then Jesus answered and said, O faithless and perverse generation, how long shall I be with you? How long shall I suffer you? Bring him here to me. I mean, Christ, he got down to business, didn't he? He said, bring this man over here, I'll help him. God's power can do things for this man. Verse 18, and Jesus rebuked the demon, and he departed out of him, and the child was cured from that very hour. Then, notice this, verse 19, then came the disciples to Jesus apart and said, why could we not cast him out? And Jesus said unto them, because of your unbelief. For verily I say unto you, if you have faith as a grain of mustard seed, you shall say unto this mountain, remove hence to yonder place, and it shall be removed. And nothing shall be impossible unto you. He's not just saying to them, look, it's me, I'm Christ. Of course you can't do it. I have to do these things. I'm Jesus Christ. He didn't say that. He said to those disciples, you can move mountains if you believe, if you trust God in faith. Where do you see this kind of faith, though? In this faithless age. Christ said elsewhere, are we even going to find faith on this earth when he gets back? Verse 21, howbeit this kind goes not out, but by prayer and fasting. Well, that's why you don't see it very much, because people aren't willing to draw near to God. They're not interested in a relationship with God. They're not interested in denying themselves food and drink in order to fast to God. That's extreme. That's extreme behavior in their minds. And they certainly don't want to put forth time in praying to God, in talking to God. Not to the extent that God's disciples are expected to. It says in one of the old correspondence lessons, also put out by Mr. Armstrong's church, he can who thinks he can, and, notice this, it adds this, and is willing to make the all-out effort with God's help. See, that's where we qualify that statement that we referred to at the beginning. He can who thinks he can, and is willing to make the all-out effort with God's help.
Request He Can Who Thinks He Can and the 7 Laws of Success. You can also visit our website at thetrumpetdaily.com to download both of these right now. All of our literature is free. There is no cost or obligation. Our newest offer in the Trumpet Daily reprint series is this packet titled, He Can Who Thinks He Can. It contains 3 encouraging articles, including one titled, What is Real Success? It's a great packet that will help you find the balance between drawing on God's awesome strength and power and also doing your part. Call the number on your screen and ask for He Can Who Thinks He Can, or just ask for today's literature. We'll also send you a free copy of the most popular booklet Mr. Armstrong ever wrote, The 7 Laws of Success. Mr. Armstrong learned more than 60 years ago that true success is not reserved for those with superior ability, but for individuals, any individuals willing to abide by a definite set of laws God set in motion that will guarantee successful results.